Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. During his 35 years as a reporter for Fox News Channel, Rick Leventhal got around in theaters of war, covering natural disasters. He was at the base of the Twin Towers on 9/11. He's got a lot of stories that he's piled up, that he's covered, reported on, piled up over 35 years. So he came up with the idea, you know what, probably make a pretty good book, all these stories. And so he did just that. He wrote a book, Chasing Catastrophe, My 35 Years Covering Wars, Hurricanes, Terror Attacks, and Other Breaking News. Rick Leventhal joins us now. Rick, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
You know, like as you were parsing through all these stories that you've covered over 3.5 decades, I wonder if there were one or two that stood out as like particular acts, you know, on the positive side, since we don't get enough of those, particular acts of heroism that really stuck with you through your career as a reporter.
Well, obviously 9/11 was a huge story and you know, one of the worst days any of us have ever experienced. And I was surrounded by people who were in the middle of chaos and confusion, stepping up and jumping in and trying to help out in any way they could. And I witnessed that firsthand on the ground, just a few blocks from where the towers had just fallen. And so obviously that was a huge story for me, a turning point in my career. It took me to Afghanistan and Iraq, and there I saw, you know, many more acts of heroism, and those do fill many of the pages of my book.
And so what was it like to report, I mean, I don't know which is more harrowing, being on the battlefront in the Middle East or being at the epicenter of the terrorist attack in New York City, but I mean, give us a sense of what's that like when you are in a position where you're relying others to protect your life.
Yeah, well, that was the case certainly in Iraq on more than one occasion. I was embedded with the Marines in 2003 for the invasion and all the way up to Baghdad. And we drove into a firefight, and it went on for 45 minutes to an hour. You know, the entire battalion was under attack, and I was right there in the middle of it without a weapon, but, you know, surrounded by guys who were very well trained, and they took care of business. It was harrowing for sure, and exciting as well, and impressive just to be surrounded by these young guys who were just doing their job without complaint in the most ridiculous circumstances and doing it bravely and just really effectively. But you know, that's hurricanes were another big thing for me, and I traveled to all over the country doing dozens of those, and you know, it's reminded me of how crazy the job can be sometimes when you are driving toward the danger and everyone else is driving away from it. But that's what the job is often, and it's something that I really enjoy doing.
What do you think about how reporting has changed over the time that you were out there in terms of the quality of reporting on major events, whether it's natural disasters or war or a terrorist attack, and just then sort of the everyday news of the everyday news coverage as well?
Well, that's a big question,
Yeah.
and you know, unfortunately, in many cases, news has been watered down, and quite often you'll see people reporting from great distances from where the actual event is happening, and part of that is just the financial cost of going to cover big stories. And in many cases, networks don't want to spend the money. You know, they'd rather keep their people in a glassed-in studio downstairs, and they can just say, well, over in Afghanistan, and then they can start reporting on what's happening from thousands of miles away. And that happens all too often. It even happened when I was at Fox on occasion, and it would frustrate me because I wanted to be where the action was. I wanted to go where it was happening, and that's really what my book is about, is all of those crazy adventures, going to where the stories were and being on the ground, watching them unfold and being a witness to history. And, fortunately for me, I saved almost every reporter notebook that I used in the field and kept them in boxes and on shelves in my office. And then when I decided to start writing the book, I just started pulling all these notebooks out. And I had original notebooks from 9/11, from Afghanistan, from Iraq. Some of them were 30 plus years old. I found a notebook from Chicago when I worked at WFLD.
Yeah.
And that Chicago story makes up, it's in the book. So there's a lot of great stories in there, a lot of behind the scenes stuff that people probably wondered what was going on, what they're not seeing on TV, and that's part of what I wrote about.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's like a detailed eyewitness account, which is a great service to go back and remember exactly what happened and who did what and so on and so forth. From your notes that happened in real time. It's interesting you say that too about you want to go where the action is. My friend Mike Tobin, who's a longtime Fox News correspondent, covers. He spends a lot of time covering the Midwest, as you know. He says the same thing about like the action. I mean, do you think like a reporter needs, in order to really have the chops to be a reporter, needs to be in a situation, in some situations like you were in, a war, a terrorist attack. I know you covered Sully landing the plane on the Hudson too, something like that.
Yes.
You don't make your chops until you do a story like that.
Well, I do believe that the best reporters are the ones who've been tested, who have been in the fire and have seen it firsthand and experienced it, and then can relate that to viewers. You need to be a great storyteller. You need to be a great writer, but you also need to, I believe, be on the ground as close to the action as you can be, and to be tested so that you can then share those experiences. It helps build character, and it helps give you the background for the next big story. And,
one of my senses about the change in news coverage over the last couple of decades is that more and more reporters pull punches. More and more reporters have sacred cows. They'll do the bidding of particular individuals or interests. And I wonder if you agree that is more prevalent, and if you ever had to encounter pressure to do exactly that.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. I would agree that things have become very fractured and opinionated, and there are definitely favoritism being shown on the air in many cases, and it's unfortunate. And yes, there are bosses who want a certain agenda injected into stories, and I, on occasion, would be pressured or encouraged to include a certain angle to a story. It didn't happen all that often, but it did happen on occasion. And for me, I was in a position where I could say no, or I could say that's not really the story that we're seeing on the ground here. That's not the direction that I think the story is taking, or this is what we're planning to talk about today. And that's what I would try to gravitate toward. Like, listen, we're the ones who are here. We're seeing what's really happening. But if it's a younger reporter without experience, if it's someone who's just doing the bidding of their boss, who's someone who's that worried about losing their job, then they're going to do what they're told to do, and it becomes, I hate to say it, but it can be fake news.
The other thing too is like, I don't want to lose access to this person, so I'm going to spike something that I otherwise would report, or I'm going to cast something in a way I would cast differently based on the truth. But I need to protect this source.
Yeah, I didn't do a lot of politics. Fortunately for me, I never really was that interested in politics. I wanted to do, what I would consider more real news, the stuff that's really happening that affects people on the ground. Not the politics can on occasion, it does, but I just didn't like the politics. And so, I didn't want to be a White House correspondent. I wanted to be a war correspondent. I wanted to be the guy they call the first out the door when there was a terror attack or a natural disaster or some kind of major incident, I wanted to go, and I did. I went to so many. It's mind-numbing how many different crazy things I witnessed over the years, and yeah, that's why I wanted to write the book, because I had all these stories, and I felt like they should be told.
But access too, it doesn't. It's not, as you say. It sometimes rears its ugly head even where you least expect it. But I mean, like being a war correspondent, you want access to the military brass. You want access to decision makers, and so the pressure to don't cast them in a negative light, because I need to be able to talk to them. I need to be able to get information from them.
It's funny you say that. There were a couple times in Iraq in '03 when we were embedded with the Marines. They didn't put a lot of restrictions on us. It was mostly just, you can't talk about where you're going or where you are exactly right now, but you can talk about everything that's happened up until this point. And there weren't a lot of other rules, but there were a couple times when I reported things, and there are stories in the book about this, when the brass came up to me and said, "Hey, can you tone that down? Can you pull back on that?" Like when we were running out of food, and we were down to one MRE a day, one meal ready to eat, and the general, some of the generals called my battalion commander and said, "Hey, can you tell him to stop talking about food? Wives and families of Marines back home are worried their boys are starving out here." And they asked me, and I said, "No, I'm sorry, but this is what's going on. Like we are down to one MRE a day, and I'm not going to not report that. That's what's really happening." So I there were a couple other incidences, but it's, you have to pick and choose, I guess. If you're in a position where they're going to potentially leave you at the side of the road and just carry on without you, then I guess you have to do what you have to do. But fortunately, that didn't happen to me.
All right. So now that you're retired, I mean, other than writing this book, how do you get your adrenaline fix?
I did this for so long that I really felt like I needed a break, and I took close to a year and just traveled with my wife and enjoyed the life of Southern California. And then we started doing a podcast together. And so every day I do shows. I'm still doing stuff on YouTube and on Patreon.com, the Rick and Kelly Show with my wife, Kelly, former Kelly Dodd. We do daily shows. I'm like back to my roots, where I'm setting up the camera and I'm recording it, and then I'm editing and uploading. We do the Daily Smash every day on our YouTube channel, and I get adrenaline from that. We have fun with it. I'm not covering terror attacks. Now I'm covering just wacky things happening in the news and crazy stuff that happened in our lives, and it's really fun for me. And it's a departure, and it's nice to be able to talk about stuff, on camera without having to try and meet someone's agenda or having to, tell the story that I was assigned to tell. I can do whatever I want now, and it's really liberating.
That's great. He is Rick Leventhal, 35 years as a correspondent for Fox News Channel. The book, Chasing Catastrophe, my 35 years covering wars, hurricanes, terror attacks, and other breaking news. Rick, thanks so much for joining us. Good luck with the book.
Thank you for having me on.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
No one can predict what's on the horizon for 2023. Shaky economy, global unrest, rising inflation. What's next? But there is one thing you can count on, and that's the peace of mind Turnkey Solutions offer your business. Protect and prepare your company for 2023 with Turnkey's All-In program. This is Turnkey's best and most popular plan for small businesses. It's all-inclusive and priced to save you thousands. Now, for a limited time, Turnkey will pay for your first month of all-in support. That's the first month at no cost. That's worth up to $3,000. How's that to help fight increased prices? All-In is a no-worries program that includes all new hardware and unlimited support. Also included is unlimited backup, the latest advanced security protection, and 24/7 real-time threat hunting.
The team at Turnkey are small business champions who share your values. Focus on your business and leave the